I got a global top 10 in the car that I drive every single day, and then I took it to the track to race people head to head. This week's video is a bit different from usual. I wanted to take you through the process of getting my car into the top 10 and then see what I can do racing with it from the back online. I ended up having a number of incredible races with some chaos thrown into the mix too. Let's get into it. If you saw my Grand Valley video, you've probably seen me obsess over my car and doing what I can to include it in Gran Turismo. If you haven't seen it, do me a favor and check it out. This is one of the escapes locations in-game that I found and recreated. As you can imagine, when I get to drive my favorite car in my favorite game mode against other real people, I take it a bit seriously. It's about 1:30 a.m. on a Saturday night, which means that we only have about one night left to do this race. And since I wasn't going to get to drive at all tomorrow, this was my final chance of the week to get to do this race at all. Since the race had been up for 6 days already, I figured the top 10 right now would be pretty competitive and pretty close to what we would see at the end of the week tomorrow. So I knew if I could nail a good time tonight, it would be something I could be really proud of. When I first looked, one of my closest friends slash rivals, SV Sosa, was in the top 10 with a 201.6, so naturally, that was my target. I've done this combo fairly seriously about 5 or 6 times now in the past, and it's one of the combos that did eventually get me to the World Finals in Monaco in the Toyota GR Cup. As you can see by how I completely missed T1, that memory has faded at least a little bit. I know this probably isn't the most exciting thing you've seen, at least not yet, but I do find it important to show people that even when you're chasing down some of the world's top times, you can still make really egregious and hilarious mistakes, especially at the beginning. Now, if this were real life, I obviously wouldn't just throw the car into every corner as fast as I possibly could. I would have at least a little bit of self-preservation instinct, but this is Gran Turismo, so I can definitely afford to just push it and try to go as close to the limit as I possibly can at the very beginning without very many consequences. With that said, it's actually a pretty stupid thing to do, so we're going to go ahead and look at the first lap that I actually completed. Whenever I try out a combo I haven't done in a while, the first few laps are all about getting used to the car. How it brakes, sets into corners, accelerates, etc. I try to take mental notes about how it handles specific corners and if there are any quirks to the car. With the amount of experience I have with both the car and the tires, as well as the track, I know approximately what I want to do on each corner, and then I adjust as I go based on how the car feels with the specific wind, tire temp, and so on. Regardless of how much knowledge I have about all of this, it usually takes about 20 minutes for me to actually get used to the feel of the car and really be able to make it do what I want it to do. You'll probably notice me missing apexes entirely, hitting apexes but going slow, sliding out, using weird gears, and lots of mistakes. I like to try out various things as I go because as much as I do know what it should take to make this car move quickly around the track, there's enough variance with little race details, and I also continually try to improve my technique. So I always hope that I can find at least a little bit of an advantage over the last time I drove this combo. I personally believe that road cars are the ultimate test of car control. In general, road cars do not have the kind of aerodynamics, crazy suspension, and ridiculous tire compounds which makes the entire experience more volatile. While any race car at any level requires you to master the various bits of car control, the weird car behavior that exists at the fringe of race cars is ever present in street legal road cars, and you must be vigilant about these things. As you can see by that corner that I just passed, I definitely did not have full control over this car yet. You can see that the car tried to get squirrely under braking, and I had to use both the throttle and the steering in conjunction to just save the car in general, let alone actually make it go fast. Once again, you can see that I'm sliding out and understeering here using second gear, and you'll see later that I ended up not using second gear whatsoever. The entirety of the beginning laps are always a bit of an experiment, and you've got to make sure that you're taking lots of mental notes so that you know that you can adjust as you go and finally make the car go fast. If you read the title, then you know I already spoiled it, and I did in fact get a top 10, but like I've said, I wanted to show you how far off I started and take you through the process. So here's my first lap, nearly 2 full seconds off of my goal. A lot of people have asked me in the past how I can stand having the ghost on and not offsetting it when lapping, but the key to me is turning it on and off as you go. It's an incredibly valuable tool, and being able to see exactly what part of each corner you're driving differently is a luxury not afforded to anyone outside of sim racing. What actually blows my mind is how real-life drivers have been able to go as fast as they have without the tools afforded to us. But I guess it may also be eye-opening in that way to look at Max Verstappen and his absolute backing of sim racing. With the ability to turn the Ghost on and off as I see fit, not only do I have an incredible amount of data to analyze on the fly, but it also is visualized, which helps so much more. With all that said, I'm going to jump to the next big leap I made in my lap time. About 7 minutes after setting my first lap, I'd gotten down to a 2:02.9, but if you can see the little Ghost in my rear view, I had cut quite the chunk of time off of that. It only took a little more than 10 minutes to get down to a low 2:02, which is nearly a second and a half faster than my first laps and only about a half second off my goal, but as you probably know, the last few tenths are definitely the hardest to chip away. After a little bit more than a half hour, I finally broke in the 2:01s and wanted to check my standings. Being only 2 tenths off the goal felt good, but it was clear the last bit of time would be difficult to extract, especially considering there were a solid 11 people within that 2 tenths. Only about 6 minutes later, I found myself ahead of that 2:01.8, and I thought that this might actually be the one, but unfortunately, it was much worse. We were very, very close to the goal, but not quite at it, and that is just the worst situation to find yourself in when you're lapping. Once again, jumping out to check my standings, and now only 3 people were between me and the goal I had set, so it was back on track and back to work. About 15 minutes later, I had whittled down my time in enough sectors to have about a 0.4 optimal lap. So I knew if I just hit close enough to my best possible sectors, I would have it. This is the lap that finally got me into the top 10. If you look at the radar, you can see that I'm actually just within my Ghost, actually going slightly slower. And despite the fact that I did lose out on that first sector and I could go even faster than the Ghost, I knew that I was fast enough in enough of the sectors that I should be able to pull this off. If you're familiar with the history of this car, then you know that oversteer is at least a little bit of its DNA. The original AE86 was already a legendary car in the drifting and toge community for many years before Initial D dropped, but I think partially because of Initial D, the 86 left an indelible mark on the culture. The fact that a car invoking the 86 actually exists to this day is special to me, and driving this car at the limit will always remind me of my own personal story, developing a love of racing partially through Initial D. Drifting is where I cut my teeth in the sim racing community, and any car that prefers to wag its tail and has a rear end that wants to overtake the front end is my favorite thing to drive. Drifting is almost never, ever faster, but you just can't escape a little bit of rotation in road cars. Pay attention to my steering in this next corner, indicated by the tiny red dot in the center of the screen. The front and rear end of a car might not always agree on how they want to move through a corner, but when you can get them to work together, when you can get your feet to help steer alongside your hands, then you're driving a truly special machine. I know I'm not Takumi. I'm so old now that I'm closer to Bunta, but being able to set a top time in the car I own in real life while deliberately sliding it through some of the corners is very special to me. These last few corners cost me probably half a tenth, and combining that with a mistake in the first corner as well as just slightly wild lines in various other corners, I think this could have been a 0.4 pretty easily. But since I hit my goal, it was time to see what I could do against the other drivers that were online at the time. Unfortunately, it was about 2:30 a.m. where I live. Regardless of that terrifying fact, I decided to jump into my region's race anyways. Logging in, I was surprised to see that there were actually even 15 people who wanted to do this race in this region, but of course I was the only A+ driver. It didn't really matter because a lot of times lower rated drivers are actually just as clean as you'd expect to see in the top split. This is not always the case, and a lot of the times when these people aren't super clean, it's not even deliberate. A lot of people just don't have good control of their cars, especially when it comes to a car like any kind of slippery road car. I want to take a moment to thank Avalerian, who designed my whole rebranding, my new logo, as well as all my liveries. He also managed to match the Neptune blue perfectly. It's strange, while all the colors were the real-life colors in GT Sport, in GT7 none of the official colors are available. Now, as you can guess, just by staying very clean and safe in the first corner, you can usually pick up a lot of positions as long as you just stay on the line. These races can be super wild, even at peak times during the day, but like I mentioned before, this was after 2:30 in the morning. I wasn't sure if this gentleman in front of us who's advertising his YouTube did that first move on purpose, but it definitely looked like he did that one on purpose. Still, it's kind of impossible to tell. He could actually be that bad at driving, but it really did seem like he was doing that deliberately. Thanks entirely to the chaos, especially thanks to this wild, scary person directly behind me now, I found myself in 4th place just at the beginning of the second sector of the first lap after starting 13th. Absolutely ridiculous. Wait, actually, now it's the second sector. All of that happened in the first sector of the first lap of the race. I guess you really can't expect that much more at 2:30 in the morning. By the end of the third lap, I had caught the third place guy, and despite the fact that pretty much everyone behind me had been in some kind of incident or was driving really crazy, it didn't mean that this guy was also going to do the same. Not quite sure if he was going to actually let me between him and the grass. He did eventually just give me the space, and better yet, he didn't hit me afterwards. In fact, it looked like he lifted off very early, and while I was initially afraid that he was just going to punt me, he was just giving me lots of space. It was really cool to find an actual gentleman racer in the midst of all this craziness. It took me another 2 laps to catch up to the leaders, but catch them I did. A lot of people end up going really wide entering the final corner so they can get a really good run into the first corner of the next lap. Unfortunately, that actually just eats up too much time, and even in cars like this, you can usually stay really close to the inside of the final corner and still get a really good run. As you can see, it didn't stop me from setting a fastest lap. Passing on the inside of the final corner can be sketchy because it's very easy for people to, even if they do it on accident, push you wide before the front straight. That was not the case, and yet another driver gave me a very clean race and continued to do so. Of course, I'm going to give him that courtesy no matter what, but I'm especially going to be very careful after a driver like that is going to give me lots of space. After solidifying that pass, only one driver was in my way on my path to victory from 13th place. After biding my time and watching him slide off the apex multiple times, I decided it was best to wait until the front straight to try to pull off a pass. I was going to hopefully get on his inside, and if he didn't want to let me, then I was going to have to go for an outside pass. I wasn't quite yet done on trying to pull off an inside pass, but he decided to make multiple defensive maneuvers, so I decided to go on the outside because it was really my only chance. Braking late, I was going to deliberately slide on the outside just a little bit, but he decided he was going to give me absolutely no space. In fact, he pushed me so hard that he too almost slipped off. And unfortunately, that was about it. I'm not going to give him any more airtime. I did join on my actual account where I set my top 10 lap, and he and his teammate both decided to continue driving me dirty. So I just left the region. It's unfortunate that dirty drivers like him and his teammate aren't actually punished. But since they're not, you can either join them and be dirty as well, or if you're like me, you can just switch to one of your other dozens of A+ accounts. After having a less than ideal race when first entering EMEA, I decided to recreate my car one more time, put that special Neptune blue on it, and jump in again, and I was very happy to see that a driver that I do know, Alex Zoni, was in the race with me. He is a very fast driver, and if I'm not mistaken, is actually a World Tour driver, and I knew that I was going to have at least a little bit of a challenge making my way through the crowd. Right off the bat, he immediately made a really good start, so my plan right now is just to stick right behind him and try to see if he can cut a path straight through the crowd. In the EMEA region at this point, it was now about 11 a.m. on Sunday, so a lot more drivers were joining, and that meant a lot more higher rated and cleaner drivers were driving. I found myself all the way next to Alex Zoni, and despite the fact that I don't think he actually knew it was me in the race at this point, I did trust that he was going to drive me clean, and I was very happy to see that, of course, he was doing so. I don't think it's a coincidence at all that the fastest drivers are generally the cleanest drivers in these daily races as well. Now, obviously, that's not always true, but I do think that the faster a driver is, the more they care about racing, and the more you care about racing, the less you want to win by smashing people out of the way. After having so much luck next to Alex Zoni, I pushed my luck and went on the inside of that other driver on the hairpin, and once again I was rewarded with some clean driving. It really does seem to be true that the top split of this region is a lot cleaner than pretty much any split in the Americas region. Once again, taking the risk on the outside, despite the fact that Alex Zoni was being very aggressive in trying to maintain and take positions, he did once again give me space. Despite feeling overall safe, I was a little bit wary of how ART's staff ranking was driving, so I did everything I could to get next to him in this corner, and he definitely turned directly into me, causing a little bit of oversteer. I wasn't too worried about it though, and I wasn't thinking that he was going to get any kind of revenge. I think he was just being clumsy, so I continued on my merry way. Looking at my rear view though, it did seem to be pretty crazy. And when I initially bumped the guy directly in front of me, leading into that short bit of straight driving, I was worried that the person who drove off was a victim of me bumping that guy into him. Upon further inspection, I noticed that he had actually slid out way before that, had overheated his tires, and completely spun himself without any kind of contact. Now, having been burned very recently by trying to pass someone on the outside, I wasn't going to take that chance. I was going to do everything I could to try to pull off a pass on the inside, and that includes pretending I'm not going to pass on the inside, but then at the last second going for an inside move. The gentleman in 7th place did not know exactly what to do, or he was just going to break that late anyways, and because of that, I was able to slip inside without any kind of incident, at least not an incident involving me. By the end of that lap, I had caught 6th place. On any given corner, I know exactly where I'd like to make a move depending on how the driver in front of me is driving. So I know that if someone goes really wide setting up for the final corner, then I could easily sneak in on the inside and just stick to the curb. Sticking to the apex, making sure I stay on the curb, there was a little bit of contact, but I actually don't think Milana meant to do that. After that tiny little bump, it actually looked like they completely lifted off. I'm not sure if they felt bad about that or if they had actually just lost that much momentum, but I was on my way and I once again set the fastest lap. After the 5th place driver unfortunately drove himself off the track, I found myself behind the 4th place driver who had just found himself a 1-second penalty. In the grand scheme of things, if you've got a driver who's moving up really quickly behind you and you have a penalty, it's probably best just to let them by because it's going to slow both of you down. When you serve a full second penalty, there's no way you're going to catch up to the person who's right behind you, but still, despite that, some people still defend extremely hard when they've got a penalty in this situation. Anticipating that by where he positioned his car, he didn't even come close to the apex. If I tried to pull off a normal pass on him, he would have pushed me entirely off the track. So I was very glad that I had actually seen that coming and I gave him a lot of extra space. Now, I don't think he necessarily did that deliberately, but when you've got someone desperate enough to try to defend extremely hard when they have a 1-second penalty in a 5-lap race, you can pretty much guess that they're going to do lots of things desperately. And that includes trying to hit an apex that they really weren't going to be even close to. It took until the beginning of the final lap to finally catch up to the next guy, and I was not looking forward to trying to pass him. In the previous race that I didn't show, he actually hit me multiple times on my way to trying to pass him, so I didn't know what to expect. He went super wide on the first corner, and as I went on the inside, he decided to go ahead and hit me into the grass. I have no clue what he thought he was going to accomplish there, or if he just reacted so incredibly slowly that he thought he was going to try to block me, but either way, I was lucky to get in front of him, and because he's just about as good as you imagine, he wasn't an issue ever again. At the very least, I understand most dirty driving. I understand when people want so desperately to win, or at the very least not let someone else beat them, that they're going to do something like block you or push you off the track. But when it comes to moves like that, desperate moves to hold on to your position that don't make any kind of sense, it makes me wonder what is going through people's minds. Best case scenario he had by pushing me in the grass would give me dirty tires, and since I was on the inside of the next corner, I'd just slide into him if I were to slide at all because of those dirty tires. I really do not understand what people are thinking with these kinds of moves. Now, with the two drivers ahead, there was actually a little bit of contact in that previous corner, and in the previous race, one of these guys was sandbagging and the other one ended up spinning right here. The guy in first place here was much faster than his quality time would suggest, and the guy who's now in second place is the guy who spun out. I think that they were battling extremely hard, and while it does look like it was a lot cleaner this time, there was a little bit of contact, so I was kinda hoping that they'd take each other out, and then I could benefit from it. It's always really nice to get a win from the back, but to be quite honest, starting all the way from the back and moving up through the traffic, just settling for a podium was definitely enough for me. Now, as you can see by the fact that I am much closer to them than I was a few corners ago, I hadn't given up. I'm always going to try as hard as I possibly can to put myself in a position where I can take a win if one does present itself, but again, I was very happy with third place there. I don't want to show you the entirety of the previous race because the entire thing was really dirty and I don't think it's actually much of a fun watch, but there was one pass that I do want to show you. After a whole bunch of dirty driving and before a whole bunch of other dirty driving, I did find myself in one really cool situation leading into the second lap of the first race that I did in the EMEA region. Just like if you're playing some kind of battle royale shooter, it's really fun to try to third party two people who are already fighting. Mr. Mannering, who had defended a little bit clumsily in the last race that we watched, was pushing Origin Cool into the grass. I do not understand why people do this, but luckily they separated just a bit, and while Origin Cool was trying to defend hard on the inside, Mannering was trying to defend hard on the outside, but I was able to brake later and push through cleaner than either of them could. That move felt good. And with that, we're going to end the video. As always, I very much appreciate you watching my video. Please let me know if there's anything else you'd like to see, or just let me know what you thought of this one. I'm really enjoying making these more narrative-based race videos, but like I've been teasing, I have some interesting concepts coming soonish. To finish off, I'll leave you with a look at my current members. Thank you guys so much for supporting me. I love you all.